Monty, you have been so instrumental in kind of pointing me in the right direction. And
it was about looking at your character defects in spirituality.
It's the integration of clinical practices with the 12 steps.
It's an absolute pleasure. He certainly knows a lot of people. He's got a lot of energy. And sometimes when you don't have so much energy, he picks you up and carries you.
Having the Monty man there certainly helps.
This is one of the places that is about the business of the solution.
The views expressed on this special broadcast of the Take 12 radio show do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting or its affiliates. KHLT is not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
Now here's that guy who's getting less popular minute by minute, your host, the Multi-Man.
And welcome, listeners, recovery family, advocates of, and perhaps some of you who should be in recovery. Thank you for tuning in to another fine episode here at Take12Radio.com on your internet dial, broadcasting to you right outside the swamps of beautiful downtown Albany, Oregon, and at the KHLT Recovery Broadcasting Studios. It is good to have you with us. So many of you have been writing me as of late, probably in the last 6 months or so, wanting to know what is the deal with this recovery coach thing. What's going on, man? Why do I need a recovery coach if I have a sponsor? Why do I need a sponsor if I have a recovery coach? What are basic life skills? Never learned them. My sponsor says he's not my financial advisor. I have nobody to help me with teaching me how to do a budget. What do I do? Where do I go? Some of you are really not very happy with the recovery coach idea. You think people are getting rich off recovery. And as far as that goes, some of you think I'm getting rich off recovery. The truth of the matter is, if anybody knows us well enough, and if you know anything about recovery coaching, I don't think anybody's getting rich off anything. I think what people are doing is they have a passion to help, and they're doing something beyond the conventional 12-step support meeting. They're going above and beyond the call of duty. That's just my personal opinion. Well, my guest this week is Tim Harrington. Now, I want to tell you that I've been mulling this thing over a lot since you've been writing me, folks, about the recovery coach deal. I didn't know how I felt about this. I wasn't sure how I was going to approach this. And you know I'm very controversial. You know that by now. So I figured, you know what? Let's just go for it. And so I tapped into some people that I really have an enormous amount of respect for, who name-dropped Timothy Harrington on my porch here at the studio. And Tim is on the show with me right now. Tim, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Monty.
Now, Tim, before we go into what this all means and the website and the services you provided, have you gotten the same kind of flack I have about recovery coaches?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been, I think it's like anything, Monty. It's sort of, we're emotional beings, and until we sort of either are willing to get all the information or willing to, open that mind, the honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness aspect of recovery, the contempt, pride, or investigation thing that we like to promote in 12-step. Mm-hmm. That's an important element of understanding anything. It's kind of going from ignorance to being educated. And ignorance not in sort of a negative way, but just not really having the full information yet. So, yes. Right.
Well, Tim is coming to us from Carbondale, Colorado. And he just described to me off the air where that was. It's just a most beautiful place in Colorado. That just fantastic. Brent Cook is one of our board members. He's in Longmont, Colorado. I was in Colorado last year for Heaven Fest, and it was like, oh my gosh, it was hot. And we went up to Rocky Mountain National Park, and it was like heaven. I mean, what a beautiful part of God's country, right?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It takes my breath away. I can't believe I live here when I leave. I can't wait to get back. Being here is like being on staycation, Monty.
Well, Tim, things weren't always going as well for you as they are now. True?
Well, I say that again.
Things weren't always going as well for you as they are now. Isn't that correct? I mean, you kind of had some struggles yourself, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm in long-term recovery. I haven't had a drink or a drug for 12.6 years.
Wow. That's a long time, my friend.
It's a very long time. I have to, even when I say it to you now, I have to sort of check with myself and go, is that really true? I was 36 when I finally surrendered, if you will, to another way of life. And,
sure.
My life very quickly for me, I think based on how old I had been and how long I've been, in the good fight, really went from analog to HD, and it was quite overwhelming, I have to say. And I think it's not unusual for that to happen in people, to people in recovery, is to go very quickly. We can rise from the ashes and sort of rebuild things pretty quickly, at least feel better very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're going to be talking about is sort of like how do we put the pieces together in terms of not just being sober or being abstinent, but fully in recovery, which entails a lot of different aspects of health.
And we're really going to jump from there. We're going to jump from the mess right now and move into what was going on and what got you into this thing. Now, earlier when we first started the show, I said some people I have a lot of respect for name dropped you, and I'm so glad they did. And two of them is Dr. Alan Berger, who does our Saturday show, Step by Step Towards Emotional Sobriety, and Matt Brown, who is also on our advisory board. And then I heard your name. So you know how you learn a new word and then you hear it all the time? I started hearing your name more and more, and I'm just so grateful that you came on the show to share what you do. And so tell the listeners exactly what it is. How did you get into this thing? I mean, it's not like you just got sober and said, I'm going to be a recovery coach, right? I mean, what happened?
No. Well, I was just sitting there like when my intervention happened, just minding my own business. I was sitting there in recovery, going to meetings, making friends, experiencing a completely different life, a beautiful life, a life of, that was rich beyond my wildest dreams. And I had nothing in terms of, money, property, and prestige. I had none of that stuff. I was just, I was just hanging out. I was going to rooms. I was sort of getting a lot of this through, just suiting up and showing up. And what happened for me is that in this really seemingly innocuous conversation with more than one person, one in the group said, Tim, you should work in treatment. And I said, and I kind of looked at the person, and my first thought was, how do you know that? Like, where does that come from? You know what I mean? Like, what do you see in me? Because it never crossed my mind to do that. So I kind of, passed it off, kind of like, yeah. And then it sort of planted a seed, and I got curious, like, because I went to treatment, and I thought, well, you mean you want me to run a treatment center? Because that's that's the ego. And
there you go. Yeah.
You want me to start my own treatment center because that's where I go, or whatever. So I started to do a little research, and it was like I was qualified to be a program tech, or what I would call a recovery Sherpa, or a client wrangler. In different ways that I ended up describing, and sort of in hindsight how I described myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that basically meant that I would go in and I would assist in moving the pieces around, waking people up, moving them to group, getting them to the gym, driving them around, et cetera, et cetera. And so, to make a long story short, I ended up getting a job at a treatment center in California. I became a program tech. I worked 40 hours a week. And some of the work that I did in there was one-on-one work with people outside of treatment. What that meant was that some people still had work issues. Some people had issues with the court. Some people had to travel, and so on. And so I would do a lot of that work, and I loved that work. I loved getting to know the person one-on-one. And so what happened was, after that, I didn't realize that kind of service existed outside of treatment. Well, it does, and it's specifically called a sober companion, and that's basically sort of an escort, somebody to go along with to make sure everything moves forward in a nice fashion. And God forbid if anything dramatic happened, I could be there to facilitate some sort of stabilization. And that sort of was the extent of it. And when I got out of treatment, these kinds of jobs continued to find me through friends of friends, through people that I knew in recovery, thought that I was a candidate for, an on-set assistant for somebody who was in the entertainment business. And out of that grew an official gig with somebody who is a broker of such services in Los Angeles.
Mm.
So what essentially that means is that she would call me and say something like, the car service will be there on Monday morning at 8. You're going to go to such and such location for 2 weeks to reintegrate somebody into their home environment and make sure they get to meetings and this sort of thing. This is somebody who demonstrated a detailed past of not being able to do that on their own. So
right.
They decided that we would use this service and do what I described to you just before this. So that went on, and I did it for this person. And then when I moved to Colorado, that service ended, that contract ended, and I started my own. And where we are today with sustainable recovery is the journey over the last 5 years and how I can become, if I'm going to do that kind of work, how can I become more valuable to the person in a non-sponsorship or therapeutic or spiritual advisor type way, but just a way to move the person down the road to get them further along in recovery than they've ever been able to do in the past.
Right. I get it. I really do.
Yeah.
I didn't for a long time, but sometimes, well, okay, here's the deal. Sponsors typically say, or at least they're taught to say, we're not your marriage counselor, we're not your financier, we're not your broker, we're not even your best friend. Although
right.
Although you usually become friends, but to start out with,
yep.
We're not your basic life skill coach. We're here to take you through the steps, help you apply and implement the spiritual principles found in those steps, so you can have a spiritual awakening as a result of working them. So you can learn to develop a relationship with a power greater than yourself, so you can stay clean and sober and live a productive life. Right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And yet, many folks, gosh, I want to be careful how I say this. If I step on somebody's toes, I'm sorry, but many times, well-meaning sponsors, and I'm talking about people that actually are qualified sponsors, people that have worked all 12 steps, have had a spiritual awakening, and are staying clean and sober as a result of that spiritual awakening, and are carrying the message. Well-intended sponsors, they themselves are still learning basic life skills, how to do their finances, how to budget, how to get from point A to point B without getting sidetracked. And so sometimes there's a real missing piece in there, and I can see where a recovery coach or a sober companion can fill that spot. Am I on track here?
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize some very basic differences between, a sober coach, a recovery coach. There's so many names for it, Mark.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But the idea of it, of someone who is not a part or actively representing what is a voluntary, financially self-supporting recovery mutual aid society,
mm-hmm.
that is completely distinct from that. So the organizational context is basically that. The sponsor serves as a representative of a voluntary, financially self-supported recovery mutual aid society.
That's right.
The companion or the coach does not.
Right.
That's a very distinct difference. And then there's the service context, where the sponsor-sponsee relationship occurs in relative isolation from professionals and anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
The service relationship with a companion or a coach occurs within the context of a treatment team or a formal treatment plan or recovery plan that comes from somewhere else a lot of times.
Yeah, yeah.
So many decisions that are the sole responsibility of the sponsor. Example, like the number of individuals to work with at one time. Like a sponsor will decide after time, that 5 is the perfect number for them. And I've heard of people who work between 15 and 20 who are at varying degrees working with different intensity of the steps. Right? Not everybody is.
Sure.
The physical setting in which the service occurs is different between the sponsor and the coach. When to terminate the service relationship is different. The service relationship is different in the sense that the termination of it may be dictated by the organization that hired the companion. But in the service context of the sponsor, if the guy isn't doing the work, they can just say, you know what, this isn't working. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's done. It's less. There's no real formal contract, right?
Right.
So those are some big differences. It's just there's a philosophical difference as well, where the sponsor provides support with a particular program of recovery. The companion provides recovery support across multiple religious, spiritual, secular frameworks. They're not particularly tied to any one thing. They're more interested in they work for the companion, for the client.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to be on the same page. Whereas with a sponsor and sponsee, you, at least as far as the big book goes, in most fellowships, 12-step fellowships, you need to be on the same page. But a recovery coach, you don't need to be.
Well, yeah, exactly. The sponsor is going to emphasize, obviously, the viability of the 12-step program, the framework for, successful recovery, because that's how they got recovery.
Right.
It works if you work it. The companion is going to emphasize a philosophy of choice that recognizes the legitimacy of multiple pathways. The operational motto for a companion or a coach is more like recovery by any means necessary, as opposed to this is what you have to do. This is what I mean. This is the way I did it, so therefore you do it this way, kind of.
Gotcha. One of the things when I was studying theology, one of my professors says the good book has only one interpretation, but you must remember it has many different applications. And I found that to be the case in recovery as well. I mean, there may be one interpretation if you're a 12-stepper, but there may be many applications. I mean, what you're going through may be something that somebody else has not a clue. They may be a normie in that area. I mean,
exactly right.
I know of a gal who bites her fingernails until she bleeds compulsively. I don't get it. I'm a total normie when it comes to that. I'm not in other areas, but but the service that you provide. So do you guys provide help in like teaching a person how to write a resume or some basic life skills, financial, that kind of thing, or do you point them in a direction where they can get that help? How's that work?
Yeah, the focus is on the goal and not the method, going back to sort of the philosophical framework.
Yeah.
So you're going to have people at varying degrees of maturity, varying degrees of skills. Certainly we're dealing with a very large population now who may fit into what people call an official term is failure to launch. Mm-hmm. People between 18 and 26 who've never really been able to sort of get into any sort of groove, finish school, et cetera, hold a job. So these are very important things as an adjunct and as an ancillary service to people who are going through and who are finding great support in 12-step. So again, this is not, for me as a coach, it's never to the exclusion of anything. You know what I mean? This is about, for me, the philosophy of sustainable recovery is not strikeout prevention, but more batting technique on how to be how to hit successfully, not how to prevent yourself from, not striking out. And
right.
There's a very deep philosophical difference there. So this is about looking at somebody, meeting somebody in a professional, non-hierarchical still, because I'm not a therapist, I'm not a nurse, I'm not none of that stuff. I don't We go shoulder to shoulder. That's what's great about coaching, is that it's non-hierarchical. We're definitely a support system that walks side by side and shoulder to shoulder. So when somebody works with me, the first question I have is, what do you want to work on? You know what I mean? So really about empowering this person to think within their own mind, because I really believe, Monty, that I'm not the person who has all the answers, but I believe the recovering person has everything that they need inside of them. It's just a matter, kind of like the way the 12 steps work, it's that uncover, discover, and discard part.
Right.
That's the same thing. We're just doing it in a different milieu, in a different framework, in a different context. And we're saying, you know what you need to do. What is it that you can tap into right now that you're having trouble with that we can work on together collaboratively to move yourself further down the road? This is recovery enhancement. This isn't...
Right.
It's like shortening addiction careers and enhancing recovery careers however we can in order to move people down the street. Like you said before, I know a lot of people that I love and respect in the 12-step community, but let's be honest, nobody is fully developed. I mean, you know what I mean?
Right,
we all have things we can work on. And I believe that there's a big pride issue, especially within the male community, of being, feeling like they can say, because they're shining in 12-step, right? They've got 12 sponsees, they got 36 years of sobriety. But, I mean, if you got behind the scenes and pulled the curtain, the wheel wouldn't be very round. It would be a lot of areas that would be, lacking. Financial, like you mentioned earlier, relationship issues. I love a story that I share with about a sponsor I had in Los Angeles who made a very clear distinction between 12-step recovery and what else you might need to do. And he used to say, like, look, I'm not a relationship counselor, but I got a step for you, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that you say, I'm not going to help you on that, but not in the way that you want the help, right? Because I remember when I got into recovery, I had a whole list of things I needed help with.
Yeah.
And I think back on it, and that's just the way everybody sort of, not in my face, but they all chuckled because they went through the same thing. They would be like, yeah, we understand you have a list of things you need to work on, but let's start here. Because what you need to do is you need to get spiritually fit, you need to get right-sized, you need to find out how to get in touch with a power greater than yourself, so then you stand on a platform of solid recovery, and then from there, this is what I love about coaching, is that it's complementary. It's just so perfectly complementary to where we get to recovery, and then on the certain things that we don't excel on, the relationship piece, the financial piece, the job piece, and all those things, that they fit so perfectly, because we don't want you to sit there and be spiritually fit, but not able to, succeed in a job and not able to, find your life meaning and purpose, because that's just not something you're good at. So why should you sit in the rooms and accumulate days and accumulate sponsees, but yet never really realize some certain pieces in your life that you're not excelling in?
You bet. You become so. The term I think of is becomes so heavenly minded. You're no earthly good.
Yes, that's perfect. I love that. And I think there's a pride issue. There's this idea that that the 12 steps should carry you all the way in all areas of your life, that you shouldn't need other help. But I'm very clear, and I'm a history buff, and I've really studied things. This is my process, Monty. I'm very obsessed with getting to the root of things and finding out, the essence of things. But I think in the essence of things is a lot of really good information and a lot of really good inspiration.
Yeah.
And so what I'm very clear on is that the spirit of the 12-step, back in the 30s, where we had a lot of really desperate drunks who were dying daily or going crazy and living in these inebriate houses, and they were, sadly never really able to reach their full potential. Thank God for Bill and Bob, and they got together and they realized this incredibly special dynamic that guys were able to find a way of life that they never thought they could. And this is a miracle that we all must tie into. But the original spirit of the 12 steps was you don't have to think anything. You don't have to do anything. There are no rules here. We're not going to force you to do anything. We're going to love you until you can love yourself. You go at your own pace. We're always going to be here for you. And I just love that essence of 12 steps. And out of that, maybe if we were still tied into that, and that it wasn't all about the dogma, and that if you don't do it this way, you're going to die, it's just that we're going to love you all the way through regardless of your process. And that maybe within that sort of original element and essence of 12-step, we would have many more people hanging out longer.
Well, yeah, maybe, and we got to take a break here, but, maybe if we allowed people to fail, they succeed sooner.
I love it.
Yeah. All right, folks, don't go away. More with my guest, Tim Harrington. SustainableRecovery.net is the website. We'll be right back.
Treatment does not have to be voluntary to be effective. Sanctions and enticements from family, employment settings, and or the criminal justice system can significantly increase treatment entry, retention rates, and the ultimate success of drug treatment interventions. Freedom Interventions provides the direction necessary to get the help of an addiction intervention. We assist with selecting a treatment experience appropriate for the unique needs of your addicted loved one and provide 6 months of ongoing support to ensure success for everyone involved in the transition into real life. If you know someone who needs a life-saving intervention, visit freedominterventions.com or call 888-762-7557. That's 888-762-7557. Freedom Interventions, providing drug and alcohol interventions and a continuum of care services to clients and their families.
Hey, it's the Monty Man from Take 12 Recovery Radio. Did you know that In the Rooms is the world's largest online social networking tool, facilitating meetings among like-minded people and assisting in their recovery? You can upload pictures and videos, chat online, attend meetings with people all around the world, write journal entries about your experiences, create blogs, forums, and communicate with people in the global recovery community and share your experience, strength, and hope. When you register within the Rooms, you get free access to daily meditations, speaker tapes, daily online video AA and NA meetings, and there's so much more. Did you know there are close to 300,000 members who are willing to share their experience, strength, and hope with you? So what are you waiting for? Visit www.intherooms.com and register for free and begin your global recovery fellowship experience today. All right, and you can visit In the Rooms by clicking on the link at any of our web pages at take12radio.com. Also, Freedom Interventions. Click on the banner link below. Tim Harrington is our guest from sustainablerecovery.net. He is a recovery coach, a sober companion. He knows what he's talking about. I am so glad he is on the show because I've been wanting to clear the air about this stuff for a while. Okay, Tim, let me ask you about sober living homes. I just want your take on this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the name of the organization. I think that would be tacky, but I will say that there is a very well-known organization that has several sober living homes across the nation. In our particular town in Albany, Oregon, I think there's like 12 of them. I mean, it's really, and we have a small town.
Wow.
And what I see, and what is the concern of many of the residents that go through these, is they have guidelines. They're not actually, they're self-governed, and they have guidelines. But for the most part, nobody's going to meetings. Nobody's reading any recovery literature. Nobody's sponsoring anybody. Nobody's doing anything outside. If they're doing anything, they're not doing anything at all outside of their 12-step support groups. And, the men's homes are servicing women day and night, and the women's homes are servicing men. I mean, there's sobriety, but there's no sanity, I just, and because they're called by the law, they're called single family dwellings, and you can't tell an adult that he has to be in by 10 p.m., right? So they have all these issues and kids coming and going. It's just craziness. Do you guys work with people that are in sober living environments, and have you run into that issue yourself?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think sober living in general are missing a great opportunity, and I think this is, it's like anything else. The adoption of new concepts and new ideas. There's been studies on that, and a lot of times from introduction to full implementation, those ideas that really, it's about 15 years.
Yeah.
So there's always early adopters, and then there's people over time who, once they see things are proven, they'll sort of take things on, and then there's just attrition based on, bad reputation and, bad things happening, because that happens in sober living. Let's be honest, that, like you said, you described an atmosphere that I hear a lot about in the Florida area, where there's a large concentration of sober living and treatment centers. You're always going to find people who are the lowest common denominator of those services being offered, and then, you find the high end. So, and then somewhere in the middle is kind of what they are in general across the country. And I think, thank God for people like, and I can't remember her name, but out of Georgia, she's the one who's really pushing this sort of national accreditation where people and consumers will have a place to go where they can find out, what constitutes a sober living of high quality. And these are all really good things that are happening. Now, as a transitional piece, I think that, again, for the most part, it's a missed opportunity to really, really, really take advantage of, continuing the treatment that people have enjoyed, all of the great treatment they've had, all of the breakthroughs and moments of clarity and therapy and all of that stuff. What often happens is it's not really a lateral move from sober living. So unfortunately, there's a huge missed opportunity. So when I talk to people about the coaching aspect with families or even treatment centers, I said, you know what? Here's a really great opportunity to enhance your brand, just coming from a business aspect that really helps the client in the long run. Because again, let's talk about the amount of money that's spent on treatment. I mean, I look at that and I go, oh my God, we need a really matching quality of aftercare and transitional care and strong linkage between that treatment and the next level of care, so that we can capitalize on all the momentum that's been made, capitalize on all the hard work that everybody's done. But often what happens is exactly what you described. It's not a lateral move. It's like post-treatment relaxation, post-treatment burnout. It's where you go when you're over-therapized, when you're burned out on treatment. And you know what? That's our fault, because we should meet those guys right there at the door and say, this isn't about, watching video games and playing video games and sitting on your couch, and relaxing after, the treatment experience. This is about you continuing to deal with and enhancing the treatment outcome by not letting you sort of get step back. I mean, you gotta, in my opinion, you need to capitalize, like I said, on that great, fantastic financial and emotional momentum, and not waste a moment, because we know what happens when we rest, when complacency takes place. We know that in our recovery, complacency is the enemy of recovery. So when we're out there in the professional world, we should realize that and set up supports that don't allow these young men and young women to slide backwards, because in a slide backwards, we know what happens. Really bad things can happen. And I like the idea of respecting and protecting the treatment investment. And I think that's a philosophy that we need to think about as a recovery community. And whether let's be honest, not everybody can afford all of the services and supports that are out there. Not everybody can afford treatment, for that matter, right?
Right.
So what I love about what's happening out there, Monty, are these recovery community centers that are being developed across the country. And these are these grant-supported, donation-supported organizations that provide free recovery support services by trained recovery peer specialists that work with treatment centers on on a volunteer basis to call their alumni, to call the people that graduate from IOPs, from any kind of organized treatment program, and call them free and say, hey, if you need support, we're here for you. It's for fun and for free support. Come to our they don't represent treatment centers. They don't represent any one mutual aid or just, group, but they just want to help you have a nice, soft place to land and an organized place to go for recreation and support and love.
Yeah. It's
so
great.
fantastic. I just love that these kinds of places are popping up more and more often across the country, even in small areas. Let me tell you that I think the state of Vermont, Monty, that's a little place.
Yeah.
A little state. I think they have 8.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Look it up.
Wow.
Connecticut, I think, has between 8 and 10. Minnesota's got a few. Denver's got, I think, 1. And just so on and so forth. It's just really cool, just a great place to go that says, we're here for you. Volunteer. There's no charge. And, let us help you with your resume, with your finance, just some basic things. Get you in touch and link you to services in the community. It's so fantastic.
And okay, so I remember a thing we had. It was called the Community Consortium here in Lynn County, and because of lack of government funding, it shut down. But it was active for years, and they would help people they'd even help people purchase tools if it was a labor job, or things like that, or training, or if they needed to get an associate's degree, they'd help them get into college, and they would do all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So this is the kind of stuff you're talking about, right?
Yeah, recovery community centers. Go to Faces and Voices of Recovery.org. They have that is a great resource for everyone in recovery. They just have a rich website. I just love these guys. They're out there advocating for recovery. However, it's really this sort of lowering the barrier to entry sort of advocacy, where it's just a matter of saying, look, we know you're hurting, and there's stuff out there that's available to people that they just can't possibly know about. So having sort of a resource like Faces and Voices is I think we're very lucky to have them.
Yeah, we are. They're incredible folks. All right. On your website, and again, folks, the website is sustainablerecovery.net, sustainable recovery.net, and you can follow the link on our website here. You have family recovery, so you're not just working with the addict or alcoholic that's in recovery. You're also working with the family. True?
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
What I've found over the years is that it's absolutely essential. And I think this is sort of right now, everybody just says, well, of course. But for a long time, it was like we just wanted to get the identified loved one into treatment. That's what the family wanted. They're in crisis. They're like, please take our loved one and fix them. And, that's the way it was for a long time. We have Al-Anon, but there's very low adaptability for Al-Anon. And what I have found is that even though they may try one meeting, just like the addict, they're like, oh, I hated it. It was just people, sitting around complaining, and oh my God, it made me more depressed. And we can empathize and we say, yeah, I understand, but let's give it a good chance. But if that isn't working for you, because again, we need some buy-in. It can't be just my way or the highway, right?
Right.
So would you be willing to ... What would you be willing to do ... to make sure that we're giving your loved one the best chance at long-term sustainable recovery? Would you be willing to talk to a family coach? And the one that I use in particular, I love because she's got 29 years in Al-Anon. And she's also educated in coaching and has acquired a very large repertoire of ways to get people to at least engage in some sort of process where they're accountable and where we know they're showing up. So, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, they're moving the ball down the field, and they're changing the conversation that they're eventually going to have with the person who, quite frankly, is so lucky to be in this really intense environment, getting a lot of attention, getting a lot of information, and quite frankly, changing a lot. Because normally, Monty, what happens is that person comes back really changed a lot in treatment, right? They get a very intense experience. So they come back, and they go to mom and dad, loved one, sister, lover, husband, and that person is sitting there looking at them with the same tools, and nothing's changed, and oftentimes that can sabotage someone's recovery.
You bet. Are you speaking of Beverly?
Yes, exactly. Beverly Buncher.
Yeah.
Yeah, Family Recovery Resources. She's really amazing. And what I love about Beverly is that she set her practice up at different levels so many people can get involved at different investment levels. You know what I mean? It's not all super expensive. There's other ways to get involved. But this is what I tell my clients when I get them at intervention times, because I do interventions as well.
Right.
Is I tell the family, whoever's calling me, I say, well, first of all, if we're going to work together, you're fired. And they're like, what? I say, yeah, you're fired as the recovery manager. But here's the interesting dynamic, Monty, is that here's one of those, in this context, they're fired and they're promoted in the same breath. Because I believe that the most important role for them is the role of whatever they've been in, mother, father, sister, brother, lover.
Yeah.
Because that's where they need to be. So I fire them and then I promote them. And so many times they're like, oh, thank you for that because I'm so terrible at the other. And I say, yeah, you're just not qualified. You're way better qualified in this other role, and we're going to help you get back into it because that's where all your value is. So I love that aspect, and I love hearing them say, thank you for firing me. I just get a kick out of it. So
That's great.
Because here's what I want. They're willing to invest all this money in a treatment program because they love this person. They want them to get well. But unless they're getting well along with them, the chances of this holistic recovery is so slim. And I just feel like everybody deserves to move forward and not just this person who gets this beautiful experience in treatment. I want the family to have the same chance.
Sure, you bet. Yeah. It really, because so many times we hear family members say, well, if we just separate the alcohol or the narcotics from our son or daughter, everything will be well. And it's their issue anyway. Why should I miss out on the football game to go to a meeting or something? It's their problem. Well, unfortunately, it's the whole ball of wax. I mean, the family's affected. If they're not afflicted, they're affected. And the sooner we realize that, the sooner we can reach out and say, I need help too, even though I'm not an active addict or alcoholic. All right, Tim, we got to take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about some of the, I think there's like 18 words here that you guys really focus on. I want to talk a little bit about that, and then touch on this eating disorder thing too, which is I'm so glad you're addressing that. Okay, folks, don't go away. More with my guest, Tim Harrington of SustainableRecovery.net when we return.
Origins Recovery Centers provides integrated inpatient treatment for substance abuse and co-occurring disorders. At Origins, clients receive expert medical, clinical, and spiritual care individually designed for their needs. Our clients leave Origins with the foundation upon which they will build the rest of their lives. Call now to speak with an admissions specialist. Our toll-free number is 888-843-8935. That's 888-843-8935. Origins, delivering real solutions for real families.
Hello there. This is the Monty Man from Take 12 Radio. Men, women, and their families experience tremendous pain and suffering due to the struggles they face from substance abuse and its co-occurring mental health challenges. They need to find a safe place for peace and healing. Well, Therapia Addiction Healing Center was born out of a deep desire to provide that safe and powerful healing environment. Therapia is a Greek word for healing. Traditionally, classic Greek medicine was holistic. It viewed the mind and body as one. At Therapia Addiction Healing Center, they have developed a holistic healing approach to treating addiction that is designed to bring into balance the mind, body, and the spirit. For more information, visit www.therapia.com. That's www.therapia.com. Therapia Addiction Healing Center, helping people recover from addictions by developing and maintaining healthy, meaningful relationships with God, self, and others. All right, and we return to my guest is Tim Harrington of SustainableRecovery.net. Now, I got a text while we went to those last two promos, and they don't even know what we're talking about, the person that texted me, but they just had to ask a question, Tim. They said, you guys got a lot of resources. I mean, you got all these people that, you're advertising and so forth and so on. Well, one size doesn't fit all, right, Tim?
What's that?
One size doesn't fit all.
No, that's absolutely true.
Yeah,
I wholeheartedly agree.
And so that's why what you're doing is so important. And so the website, again, folks, is sustainablerecovery.net. SUSTAINABLE recovery.net. And I encourage you to check that out. Now, out of sight, out of mind. So when you get done listening to the show, folks, go to the website or write it down now. There is a plethora of resources there for you. I really encourage you to check that out. Now, Tim, one of the things in your bio on the website, it says, Tim says the words most frequently used to describe what we do include the following. And you covered some of these already, but identity, encourage, engage, motivate, share, express, enhance, help, link, consult, monitor, transport, praise. Well, that's good. We need that. Enlist, support, organize, and advocate. Let me just touch on a couple that really got my attention.
Okay.
Engage. Tell me about that.
Yeah, engagement. A lot of times the issue is not the information of what a person needs to do, the list. A lot of times, let's just take a treatment example.
Yeah.
The person goes through treatment, there's a discharge plan, there's an idea of what you're going to do when you return, the things you should do when you hit the ground, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's easy stuff. That's understandable. A lot of time with people, that's not the issue. I mean, especially with people who have been through multiple treatments. The issue is executive function. It's actual action. It's putting things into action. Now think about it. When somebody goes through treatment, they're in this really controlled, beautiful, room-like environment, lots of structure,
right,
lots of intensity. The level of intensity is really high. I mean, like I've stated before multiple times, treatment is such a great investment. There's so many beautiful, amazing things that happen in treatment. I mean, it is incredible. I've had family members, I've gone through it myself, very important part of my process. That's all well and good, but that's just the acute part of the thing. That's just stabilization. That's just setting the bone. That's just getting people defogged, because most of the time, 15 days of a 30-day program is just coming out of the fog of using. That's detoxing,
right,
sort of getting your land legs and all that. So the real issue is always going to be the linkage, this strong linkage between treatment and long-term recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about how can we best serve our customer, our client that has just gone through this beautiful process, and then transition them into what is always, for every single person leaving treatment, any kind of transition is going to be stressful. How do we mitigate that stress? How do we give these people the best chance at hitting the ground running, to support all this hard work they've done, to implement the treatment plan that was worked on so diligently by counselor and client? How can we do that? for a very good, for a cost, an opportunity cost. This is that economic principle of what does something cost you by not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, whether right? So that's the way I look at this. I look at this in sort of it's an equation. It's a very simple mathematical equation. This plus this equals this.
Yeah.
So my point of view is, based on what I see people go through, based on what emotional capital and financial capital that is outlaid by family and by the loved one, we need to look at this in a way that here's the way I look at it, Monty. Every time somebody comes into my life, this is the most incredible gift I've been given. So I think it's like this orb of beautiful, rich love and spiritualness. It's just incredible. It's what I was, right? When I was struggling, I was still a loving being that had a chance of turning my life around. So I look at it and I say, what gives this family the best chance of success? And that isn't necessarily that I'm right about everything along the way, but I can see underneath the subtext and the support that needs to be there to help things move forward. And that's really what sustainable recovery is about. How do we create for each person, each family system, a plan that is sustainable for them, that keeps, their finances in mind, their emotions in mind, because we know this isn't a straight line. Recovery is not a straight line. It doesn't happen. It's messy. It's up. It's down. And how can we create an environment? How can we create a system of support that helps the family navigate what ultimately is not a it's not a clean. It's messy. So
it is messy.
So I look at myself this way, Monty. I thought a lot about what was healthcare like a long time ago when our parents grew up. You remember that old model of the doctor that made house calls?
Sure.
The doctor who carried that black doctor bag, who was a part of your family, who loved you, was there at your birth sometimes.
Yep.
And there when you graduated from high school, maybe even there when you and maybe there went to your wedding. This whole idea of healthcare being about a loving connection between the professional and the person who has issues with health, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was never about the doctor personally, but the doctor had no stake in it other than how can I help this person heal?
Right.
And right?
Right.
So it's
you
just
bet.
sort of I'm altruistic. I believe altruism is a practice that can keep me healthy. There's scientific data that says altruism changes me at a cellular level, right? So when somebody calls me or I'm lucky enough to be invited into somebody's life who's in some part of the recovery continuum, I take that stuff seriously. I'm like,
you bet.
But not because I'm the most important person, that I believe that my custodial responsibility is the most important aspect of what I do. Not that I know exactly what that person needs to do, but that I will be a custodian of their process, and I will help them move it forward, whatever that looks like. And I'm constantly learning every day. I mean, I commit myself every day to learning as much about what's going on out there that may be of value to somebody that comes into my sphere.
Yeah, very well said.
That's the way we look at it. It's not. It's just how lucky am I to be invited into this person's life, and I believe there's the power greater than myself. The universe out there has things in mind for me, and I just got to be available to it, and then say, how can I help?
Yeah, I love what you just said because I had a pastor friend of mine tell me years ago, because I was whining, I'm not qualified for this and I can't do that, and he says, you know what, God isn't interested in your abilities, He wants your availability.
I love that.
I know, I love that too. I really do.
Thank you for that one.
Yeah, you bet. We're almost out of time. I wanted to cover some of these other words, but maybe next time we'll do that. But I do want to mention that because this is such a big deal. It really is. You guys do some work with eating disorders as well. And if there's one thing I know for absolutely certain, because of my own experience, that we will replace one addiction for another. And if we don't fill that God-shaped hole, we don't fill that hole that's only meant for a higher power, we'll fill it with something. And many times it will be another substance called food. And we have to eat to live. It's kind of a whole nother ball game, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the most complex. It's one that I'm married to somebody who is in eating disorder recovery. She is also the author of a book called Making Peace with Your Plate, Eating Disorder Recovery. You can look it up. Their website is robinandespera.com, and you can just Google Making Peace with Your Plate, Eating Disorder Recovery. You'll get you there. But here's the big picture, right? We have a diet industry in this country that is, I mean, it's so huge. It's overwhelming how big it is and how powerful it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's simply a commercial enterprise. It is not interested in sustainability.
Yeah.
It is interested in very much what I was interested in an addict, and that is symptom fix. That is, how can I get from where I am right now to this weight or to this place of feeling better about myself? But it has no long-term vested interest in a sustainable plan or program or approach, because if it did, it's biting off its nose to spite its face. So
yeah.
The idea is no matter what you're struggling with out there, whether it's eating disorder, any kind of process addiction, anything that is keeping you from reaching your full potential or your authentic self, anything that's like a pebble in your shoe,
Mm-hmm.
finance, romance, whatever it is, there's help out there and support. And it's not always about, the person needs to go to treatment. This is about becoming, the hero in your own recovery, to taking responsibility and realizing there's such a rich amount of resources out there that are really interested in your long-term success. Now, what I'm interested in overall, Monty, is just starting the conversation and educating the general public that it's not a one-size-fits-all, and the answer isn't always one thing, and that we spend more time researching buying a car than we do going to treatment.
You're right. You bet we do.
What I'm out there doing is encouraging people that if I'm not the person for you, that I'm always going to encourage anyone to spend as much time researching the options you have for your own personal health and well-being that you do for looking for a car. and I think if you do that, your chances of finding what you need for you are really good.
Yeah, I agree, man. Oh, Lord have mercy.
I want to continue this conversation with you, Monty, just not about necessarily promoting sustainablerecovery.net, my particular business, but I have a vested interest in sustainable recovery as a philosophy and as a way of educating the public to take control of the process. There's a lot of, let me just finish by saying this. There's a lot of conferences out there every year around the country where people in the treatment world and the recovery support services world and so on get together and talk about how great they are and what they do. What I love about forums like yours and others is that we talk more about how we can educate the general public on empowering them to find out what this whole world is that we live in, you and me, what it really is, and sort of demystify it and empower them with resources and hope that they can do this, that they have the resilience and strength within them to really change the trajectory of their family and their family system so they can shorten addiction careers and enhance recovery careers by becoming, all I need in a family, Monty, is one person to be the recovery advocate. And if they'll work with me, I can change the trajectory of that process and shorten what can become long processes. They don't have to be that long. There was a study done that says from concern to doing something in a family system is 9 years.
Wow.
A lot of damage can be done in 9 years.
Wow.
We lose a lot of people, and you know that.
This is the number one health threat in our country, addiction. We don't have 9 years.
No, we don't. I don't want to see people. Look, this is about, like I said, reducing addiction careers and enhancing recovery. That's really my goal and my calling, I believe, because every day and all day, that's what I do. I try to figure out if somebody comes into my sphere, I'm like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to accelerate recovery. We're going to enhance it. We're going to reduce this addiction career for your family so we can change the trajectory of your family and hopefully stop this from happening in the future generation.
Yeah, you bet. Well, Tim, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to have you on again real soon because we need to continue this dialogue. Folks, I hope you get a little bit better understanding of what a recovery coach is, what a sober companion is. I believe that this is a service that many people really need. And, is there a cost? Well, let me tell you something. It's going to cost you a whole lot more not to do this in many cases. It's just, look at the damage assessments that some of us did in treatment. Look how much money we spent. Oh my gosh, we could go on and on about that. Tim, thank you so much, my friend, for coming on the air and sharing what you're doing and the passion you have for people.
Thank you, Monty. It's my pleasure. I can't wait to talk about this more and have more conversations about how ultimately we can just help more people.
Yeah, right on. All right, Tim, do not hang up. I want to talk to you offline. Folks, the website is sustainablerecovery.net. You can follow the link right here on this page. If you're on your smartphone or tablet or whatever, it's there too. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's sustainable recovery.net, sustainablerecovery.net. Please visit the site. You know what? If you're not afflicted, if you're not affected, I will bet you anything you know somebody that is. You need to pass this stuff on. Secrets kill, my friend. And sometimes if we don't say anything, what's that saying? Evil abounds when good men do nothing. Don't do nothing. Do something. Please pass it on. Don't forget our email address, take12radio@comcast.net. Until our next broadcast. Oh, man, I am wishing God's perfect serenity for you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty.